So you got the noise and the sirens and the shouting and the people selling weed, people selling beer, the kids, sometimes kids in the early hours of the morning, you know. But all of this was soundtracked because the Home Office were trying to drown out what the rioters were shouting to the journalists. And the way that they chose to drown it out was to play music. And their main weapon of choice was Mr. Blue Sky by ELO. So you'd have rioters, fire, smoke, shouting, noise, everything kicking off, and then you'd hear, "Hey there, Mr. Blue, it's so nice to be with you." Just madness, just madness. And this went on and on and on, day in, week in, to like 3.5 weeks of madness. My name's David Nolan. I'm a journalist, and 31 and a bit years ago I was stood here reporting on the Strangeways riot, which was taking place right up there. I was working for a radio station called Piccadilly Radio, and Piccadilly Radio was the biggest independent station outside of London. It was a big deal, a huge newsroom, huge sport and news content 24 hours a day. You know, news-wise, Moss Side was kicking off, the gangs were kicking off, IRA were blowing us up left, right and centre. And then the heart of this was Strangeways riot. People always refer to it as the Strangeways riot, but you know, another way of looking at it is the Strangeways protest. April 1990, when the riot kicked off, the week before there'd been the Poltex riots in London. Or you'll remember that footage of like the guys being knocked down by the police horses and the wooden rods being pushed through car windows and all that stuff. So that was in the air at the time. I think that can't be a coincidence, to be honest with you. But there was issues of overcrowding, sharing cells, of having to slop out in the morning, basically having to shit in a bucket in your cell, issues over the food. So it was 1990 was a very tense time generally, coming out of the 80s, going into the 90s, and maybe that fed into why the riot kicked off. April the 1st, 1990, there's a church service going on, and one of the inmates, Paul Taylor, grabbed hold of the microphone in the church and said, "This man," pointing to Father Noel Proctor, "has spoken this morning about the blessing of the heart. You know, but what about our hearts in this jail and the conditions we're suffering in?" Then the riot kicks off. They get keys, they break out of the church into the wider prison. There's building work going on, so there's metal scaffolding all around the jail, and they use it to break through the roof space, create a hole and climb up onto the roof, and the riot and the occupation of the jail begins. The atmosphere here, I mean literally here where I'm standing now, it was like a carnival. There was people selling beer, there was people selling t-shirts, there was people selling dirty burgers, you know, those like 3 AM city centre Manchester dirty burgers, those kind of ones. People selling weed. There was the noise of the people shouting from the rooftop. They were using like traffic cones to try and amplify the voices. You had helicopters going above. You had all the journalists knocking about. You had just this bizarre party atmosphere going on. People would come down and watch in shifts. So you'd have people who come down before work at 8:30 in the morning. People would come on the lunch times to eat sandwiches and watch the riot. People would come after work, just again maybe bring a few tins and watch the riot. You would get kids coming down at 3:30 in the afternoon after school had kicked out. So woe betide you if you're a TV journalist about to do a live report at 3:30 in the afternoon, and you get all the kids coming behind you going, "Oh!" It's going to happen, isn't it? It was naive to think that anything else would happen other than that. But the one thing I remember, so you got the noise and the sirens and the shouting and the people selling weed, people selling beer, the kids, sometimes kids in the early hours of the morning, you know. But all of this was soundtracked because the Home Office were trying to drown out what the rioters were shouting to the journalists. And the way that they chose to drown it out was to play music. And their main weapon of choice was Mr. Blue Sky by ELO. So you'd have rioters, fire, smoke, shouting, noise, everything kicking off, and then you'd hear, "Hey there, Mr. Blue, it's so nice to be with you." Just madness, just madness. And this went on and on and on, day in, week in, to like 3.5 weeks of madness. And I was 25, and I was thinking, this is like being in apocalypse now. This is like some kind of weird mental torture, because we would sleep in the car. I slept in the car right outside there for night after night after night. And you'd have all of this madness going on, and then at the same time, which was like funny and weird and all the rest of it, but then you could hear from the other side of the wall, you could hear them breaking down the walls to get to the sex offenders unit, the lowest of the low, the scum of the earth. And you could hear them smashing down the walls, trying to get to the sex offenders unit. And you could hear them shouting, "Beasts, beasts, 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 beasts," as they got closer and closer to the sex offenders unit. And that kind of gave you a little slap round the face to kind of think, it's funny and it's mad and it's weird, but also it's really, really scary at the same time. So obviously they had the run of the prison, and that kind of meant two things. Having, you know, interviewed lots of the prisoners afterwards, that meant kind of two things. One was the pharmaceutical department, which was probably the first port of call, and then secondly was the kitchens. So they had, you know, the run of the place. And certainly I was told that they bypassed the prison food and managed to find some nice juicy steaks that were possibly not intended for them. Maybe it was intended for the governor or the staff or something like that. But they were living pretty high on the grub, because there was tons and tons of grub inside there. So they weren't short of grub. And in fact, I can remember sometimes they would come out with like plates and show us and going, look, we're eating steak here. Look at that, whoa! You know, and you know, we couldn't see it, but on the other side of the wall, the prison officers were there with the riot gear on, and were kind of banging on the shields and saying, you know, doing like, "Come on then, come on," and they were going, "Look at that, we're having steak. What are you having?" You know, it was that kind of funny, but obviously underneath it was a real kind of, you know, an opportunity to turn the tables here, which is exactly what happened. They had the run of the jail and they could do exactly what they wanted, and they did. You think, oh yeah, it was the, you know, the Manchester riot and all that kind of stuff, and the music and the madness and the craziness. But, you know, 2 people died, remember. You know, a prison officer died of a heart attack shortly afterwards, and a sex offender who'd been attacked, he died in hospital later after as well. So 2 people died after the riot, which is really, really important that we remember that. And the madness was kind of, it even got, in a way, madder towards the end. I can remember there used to be like a chain link fence down there, and this taxi pulled up, and this woman got out, and big blonde hair, stilettos, fishnets, leather skirt, leather jacket, the full bit, and she runs up to the fence and she starts shaking the fence like that, and she goes, Gary, love, oh, come down, me head's in bits." And we're all falling about laughing at this poor woman, you know, and we're laughing and we're kind of thinking, oh God, this story's got to end soon because we're all going mad here. You know, if you think it's mad in here, it's getting that mad out here. So when, you know, there was I think 5 rioters were left and they were taken down by a cherry picker and brought down, and that was amazing. And then you kind of like, you're a bit bereft then. You're thinking, well, what am I going to do now? I've been thrown out of my home, which was here, this street here, you know. This is where I've lived for weeks and weeks, and now what am I supposed to do now? And now weirdly, it's kind of come full circle for me. I'd done a lot of books, and I'd done lots and lots of music books about Tony Wilson and Manchester music and all that kind of stuff. And then I wanted to write a novel, and I wanted a backdrop for the novel. And I thought, well, what could I write about as a backdrop that I could summon up just like that I don't have to do any research or anything. And so I set it in 1990 with the backdrop of the riot. And because I could remember every single thing about it. I can't remember where I parked my car to come and see you lads, but I can remember the smell of the dirty burgers, and I can remember the kids going like that behind the reporters, and I can remember the woman shaking the fence shouting, "Come down Gary, my head's in bits." I can remember it all, but I can't remember where I parked my car. That was the weird thing about the riot, is that I do not remember covering any other story at all during the riot, because that was all anybody cared about. It's what the police cared about, because there was a thing called Operation Container going on to get people out of the jail and into the jails all around Manchester. It's what the Home Office cared about. It's what the media cared about, because let's be honest, people like me probably looked at it and thought, this is the big one. This is where I'm going to win the awards. This is where I'm going to get my job at ITN, all of that stuff. Very selfish, you know? And I can't remember any other stories going on. So, you know, someone told me years later that there was one murder during 9/11. Someone thought, ooh, I could get away with something here. And they did. So there's one murder that happened during 9/11 because they used it as a distraction. And I thought, that's a great idea for a book, but I don't really know anything about that. What was the biggest thing when I was younger as a reporter that was the biggest distraction? And that was the Strangeways riot. So yeah, I wrote a novel, Black Moss, which is about a child murder which takes place, and somebody does it while all the journalists and all the police are looking up there at the roof of Strangeways, because it always made me think, what did people get away with when all the media and the Home Office and the police cared about was the Strangeways riot?